So today we have another interview with the director of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Naoki Hamaguchi, where he talks a little bit more about the changes they made to the game's story, its structure, and focusing specifically on areas like Gongaga and that relationship between Cloud and Tifa, as well as the fan feedback that they've received about the game's controversial ending. I've got my own thoughts on that as well. So this interview comes to us directly from Square Enix, where they sat down with Hamaguchi leading into the week of the Game Awards to talk a little bit more about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So starting off first, they ask Hamaguchi about all of the new additions to the game's story. And why did they feel it was important to add all of this new stuff? So Hamaguchi goes on to say, all of that is really down to the intent and the desire of our main story writer, Kazuhige Nojima. He really wanted to go deeper into those areas of the original FF7 that were optional. So that includes characters like Yuffie and Vincent, but also Gongaga. That was one of those areas that you didn't have to visit if you didn't want to. He also goes on to say that a lot of this was done to give more context to the story, but also give way more understanding to the entire world of FF7, which I think they did a really fantastic job of doing and really fleshing out these characters in the world and adding to the overall story with that world building, which is so important, which leads to a character like Zack, which we know from the original game, Zack wasn't really in the OG FF7 all that much, and to really conclude his story, I believe he actually had to do a side quest, which a lot of people could miss. But Hamaguchi goes on to talk a little bit more about Zack by saying, Zack Fair is a good example. Zack is a really major character in Rebirth. He plays a much bigger part of the story than in the original game. So Gongaga being where he comes from was a place we really had to look at and talk about if we wanted to show more about Zack, which I genuinely really love. Now, as far as exploring Gongaga, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm a little too dense. I did struggle with the exploration aspect of Gongaga, but the area itself is so beautiful and it's been so expanded, not again just with the story, but with just exploration and the size of that area. In the original game, Gongaga was a coffee break. You went there, you got some materia, and then you pretty much booked it, unless you wanted to fight, tank Ceratops, which was pretty cool. But again, because Zack is so much more important to the story, and they're now incorporating elements of even Crisis Core into the Remake trilogy, they had a really great opportunity to expand on Zack, the town that he comes from, the people that are still there, and the relationships that he made with those people. One of my favorite side quests is when you meet one of the young men who is training to become like one of the mercenaries of the town to help protect the village. And the more you talk to him and get to know him, you realize he was friends with Zack. He really looked up to Zack, and they would go out into the Gongaga forest and train together. And what's really sweet about that mission is that without even knowing it, Cloud kind of takes on the role of Zack, and he kind of mentors this kid towards the end, and he teaches him, how to do proper workout form when it comes to squats. The kid is like, Zack would have done this, Zack would have done that. And Zack was always out here training. And again, doing little things like that do so much to build up those characters in that world building. You obviously have Zack's parents, which we do get to meet them in the original game, but now it's so much more fleshed out. We actually get a cutscene with both of his parents, and they're talking about how they miss him and how they're worried about him, but he's probably off traveling the world. And it's so sad because at that point, Zack is gone and they don't know that he's gone. And it makes Shinra even more nefarious that they had these internal memos talking about, Sephiroth KIA, Zack KIA, but they don't even notify the families, which is heartbreaking. So his parents, they think he's still out there when in reality, at that point in the story, he's unfortunately gone. And then there's one of the biggest characters in that section, that's Cissnei, when she's from Crisis Core. So to have a character from Crisis Core come back and have her be kind of like that anchor to the compilation and what she meant to Zack and the Turks, and how she's now presiding over this village to protect it and keep it safe in case maybe Zack does come back one day, These were all little nuggets that I think Nojima-san wanted to include in the original game and tried to flesh out in the compilation, and sometimes it just didn't work. But now that he gets this second chance to revisit the story, he can flesh them out so much more and really just kind of correct what he felt he messed up on, or maybe didn't do as good of a job on in the previous games in the compilation. So it's super cool. And as far as like the area itself, like Gongaga is gorgeous. It's got a really beautiful soundtrack as you explore. It's got some great enemies. It's just kind of a headache to explore. Now, something that we've covered in previous interviews was taking Nojima's story and trying to fit it into a gameplay narrative, trying to find ways to make it make sense, and how sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and you need to kind of reconfigure things. And Hamaguchi actually gives an example at this point, talking about the Gongaga reactor and how initially Nojima had the entire party go to the reactor, Tifa would then fall into the live stream, and we would have that scenario. But in order to make it kind of work in a gameplay sense and really add a sense of tension, they decided to split up the party where Cloud, Barret, and Red head to the reactor, things go bad, and then it's up to Tifa, Yuffie, and Aerith to catch up and try to help them out. And Hamaguchi would go on to say why they ended up changing that specific gameplay scenario by saying, "That was the scene I asked to be changed. It wasn't like that in the original plan. The party went together to the Mako reactor, and then Tifa would have fallen into the live stream. I realized that for the story to work as a game, and for the individual character development, we needed to have Cloud's party as the vanguard and Tifa's follow-on and catch up later. That way, you get the powerful effect of Cloud's struggle and then the impact of Tifa falling into the live stream through gameplay," which I love. And again, this is one of the reasons I genuinely really love that Hamaguchi's in charge, is because not only does he understand the world of FF7, he understands just games. You know, how do you structure a game to feel impactful, to feel fun, to feel exciting, to give that sense of anxiety to the player? And that section of the game in particular hits the nail on the head. Cloud and Barret and Red go, they get into trouble, and then it gives you this sense of urgency. The stakes are high because Cloud is not well in the scenario, and it's not just the Mako fumes that are causing these issues. So once things start to go down, Tifa in particular gets incredibly worried because she's like, oh crap, we need to catch up and see what's going on. So now it's this rush to the reactor with Tifa and Aerith and Yuffie trying to help out the party, and there's that fantastic cutscene that plays out where Tifa's trying to get to Cloud, and at this point he's been fully controlled by Sephiroth in a sequence that is so cool but also so disturbing and eerie, because it's a situation where Cloud's not home right now. It's Sephiroth. "Can I take a message for you?" And he just goes on this killing spree, destroying these Shinra soldiers, and you see it in the mannerisms. That's not Cloud anymore. That is a Sephiroth stance. That is a one-handed stab, and Tifa is trying so desperately to reach him, and when she finally does, she's trying to break through to him. But unfortunately for Cloud, that devil on the other shoulder of Sephiroth is telling him, you can't trust her. Who is this girl? I murked her back in Nibelheim, so what is she doing here? You know those doubts you have, like you can't trust her. And unfortunately in that moment, Sephiroth wins, and he has Cloud almost kill Tifa, and that leads her to fall into the live stream. And Sephiroth cannot stand Tifa and Aerith because he knows how vital they are to Cloud's stability, which is why he continues to gaslight Cloud into not trusting Tifa. He is essentially Tifa and Aerith's biggest hater. You know, the man is going for Player Hater of the Year at the Player Haters Ball.
Silky mink made out of 100% rat ass. Hit me, baby.
And what's amazing about the live stream sequence is that that is set up for part 3. So now when we go into Cloud's mind prison in the live stream, Tifa now, whether she realizes it or not, has so much more experience with this live stream. She's been in this place before. She can hopefully help Cloud now navigate through his own thoughts and feelings to try and find the right path for him to come back. So again, it's really brilliant. They're setting up so many things that are going to hit us super hard in part 3, especially with that ending. Again, they've really planned this stuff out in advance, and again, for someone like Nojima to kind of get a do-over, to kind of fix some things, I think is just brilliant. And to speak a little bit more on that live stream sequence and why they put it there, Hamaguchi goes on to say, the reason that was put there was because it was meant to link to the next area of Cosmo Canyon. It's subtly setting up the scene where the characters are all around the campfire and they're talking about their pasts, where they grew up, their worries and their fears. It helps make Tifa and her emotions that she shares at Cosmo Canyon that much deeper. And the Cosmo Canyon area is so fascinating because as players, we were all thinking, okay, once we get to Cosmo Canyon, Bugenhagen, he's going to have all the answers. The Boogs knows everything. He's going to know about the planet, all of these different timelines and worlds, and he's going to give us the answers that we need. And then we get there, and he basically gaslights the entire party, especially Tifa, into thinking, yeah, you guys are weird. You're just hearing stuff. You were too close to the Mako fumes. You didn't see a weapon. None of that's true. And it's upsetting, and especially for Tifa, because she is someone who has literally fallen into the live stream. She was carried and protected protected against Sephiroth by a weapon. She was in her own little like mind cave to a degree and reliving certain memories. So she has firsthand experience in all of this stuff. And for her to be gaslit by Boogs and the people of Cosmo Canyon into not believing that what she just experienced actually happened is pretty heartbreaking. And it is kind of defeating for Tifa in that moment. She's like, is there something wrong with me? Am I going nuts? So it's really well done. And eventually later on in the story, Bugenhagen would apologize to Tifa in the party, doing a little bit of self-reflecting and admitting that there's still a lot that he probably doesn't know about the planet because it's been so long since he's left Cosmo Canyon and actually explored. So there's some really great character development there for Boogs as well. And up next, Hamaguchi kind of jumps back to the Gongaga reactor scene and focuses specifically on the relationship between Cloud and Tifa and how she's trying her best to keep him grounded and pull him back. So he elaborates by saying, she's there to ground him. He even asks her after Gongaga that if she sees him start to go off the rails, to please pull him back. At the same time, she's got her own worries, so Cloud may be supporting her in a similar way. There's quite an interesting dynamic between the two of them, which I genuinely really love. That relationship, that push and kind of pull between Cloud and Tifa is so well done, not just in Remake, but in Rebirth. And there are so many instances where Cloud is going off the rails. He's getting those Genova headaches. He's becoming this weird zombie. And some of the other characters will try to keep him grounded and help him out. Barrett, Aerith, but the one who is there consistently for him is Tifa. And Tifa is honestly kind of in between a rock and a hard place when it comes to Cloud, because on the one hand, she knows something is seriously wrong with him, but she also knows that she can't keep poking and prodding at him for fear of causing some sort of collapse or causing him to freak out and be lost forever. So there's so many scenarios in that game where Cloud is overwhelmed with these emotions and memories, and Tifa is there to ground him. She literally grabs him by the hand or by the shoulder and, asks him, are you okay? Like, do you need to take a break? You see that again in Nibelheim when they go to the reactor. It's Cloud, Tifa, and Yuffie, and Cloud is having these moments where he's starting to remember Zack, which didn't happen in the original game. And he's able to open up to Tifa and confide in her, and again, stay grounded because of her presence. And Cloud does the same thing for her. The further they get into that reactor and they end up back in the spot where Tifa's dad was killed, Cloud is there to kind of take those emotions that she's feeling and kind of lower them a little bit and let her know, like, hey, I'm here for you. We can get through this. So it's a really beautiful dynamic between those two characters, and Tifa's working her butt off to make sure Cloud's okay, and she's going to be working overtime in the next game to bring him back. So it's a beautiful, beautiful relationship that is just so well written, and with today's technology, you can do so much more with how those two characters interact. Up next, they ask Hamaguchi about the humor that kind of aligns the Rebirth story, and Hamaguchi goes on to say, I do think humor is important to this game. That said, I don't want to generalize that things with humor are good and things without humor are bad. Both things have their place. But it was an integral part of the original 7, so in Rebirth, we really had to be funny. That's what players and fans expect and want, which I love. You get some people who will complain and say like, oh, the game is way too funny. It's like Yakuza, like I don't remember that. But if you look back at the OG FF7, that type of humor permeates the entire storyline in specific moments, whether you're in Wall Market and Cloud has to dress up as a girl, and then you're going through these different areas to find different items, including underwear for Cloud to wear, so he can then get into Corneo's mansion. Red 13 being on the Shinra 8, stuck in this Shinra uniform, trying his best to walk around like a human. All the way down to just like some of the weird goofy animations where Barrett would shake ferociously or Cloud would just shrug his shoulders and tilt his head. So that humor is there, and they're just kind of bringing it to the forefront and putting it into the Remake trilogy in a way that I think works. You need those moments of levity after something harrowing or scary or depressing happens. It can be a bit of a difficult thing to balance, but I think they really nail that balance in Rebirth in particular. And again, one of my favorite scenes in Rebirth is Red 13 on the Shinra 8 wanting so desperately to play Queen's Blood, but because he's not human, they won't let him. So what does he do? He does what a child would do. He essentially does the two children stacked on top of each other in a trench coat routine, and he puts on that Shinra outfit, he puts on the boots, and he tries to pass himself off as a human because he just wants to play Queen's Blood. He just wants to challenge Cloud and have fun. He's dancing like Michael Jackson. He's making a kid in the crowd cry, which has that really funny line of the parent going, like, it can't hurt you. It's just like you see Red's personality, his true young personality permeates so much of his character, even when he's doing the intellectual shtick, as he calls it. It's just super funny. They even talk about having a lot of that humor permeate synergy attacks and how somebody on the team just wanted to have Barrett and Aerith do an attack where they both put on sunglasses, and their synergy attack, Sweet and Sour Salvo, was born out of that. And once they actually did it and Hamaguchi saw it, he's like, yeah, we're going to keep that in. And it's great. Again, the character stuff, the humor, the bonds between these characters, it's not just in that story. You see it in gameplay. You see it in those synergy skills and abilities. It's so masterfully done. I know I sound like a fanboy, but I just really appreciate the little details of this stuff. Now, to end the video, we're going to jump over to another interview that Hamaguchi did with Square Enix, where he talks a little bit more about the feedback that fans have given about the game's pretty controversial ending. He would go on to say, yes, we've had some people who are really positive towards the ending. They really liked it. On the other hand, we've had people who maybe weren't so keen on it and had more negative things to say. I think that both of those opinions are very valid and worthwhile. And to borrow something that Mr. Katase says, we wanted to inspire speculation and discussion among fans during the gap between the second and third game. And people are still talking about it. You have positive takes and negative takes, interesting discussions, and sometimes they all collide. That's basically the response we wanted to achieve. Which, again, if you've watched any of my previous videos, I genuinely really loved the ending of the game. It was super confusing at first, but the more you kind of dive into the nuances of it, the fan theories, the stuff that really seems solid when it comes to those fan theories, that ending becomes so much more dark and interesting for a character like Cloud, as well as the audience, specifically focusing on that scene where they're in the Forgotten Capital, where Aerith is, presumably just been buried in the water, and everyone's sitting there and Cloud suddenly sees Aerith sitting next to him. That scene in particular has sparked so many discussions, so much analysis when it comes to the lighting, the direction of the scene, even the music. I believe Alex Mukalla broke down the music of that scene, and I forget some of the details, but I think it's essentially like a weird version of Genova's theme that's playing in the background to kind of signal to those who are really paying attention, like, okay, something is afoot here. Is this really, truly Aerith? And again, I'm under the impression this is not Aerith. This is either Genova masquerading herself as Aerith, or it's some sort of manifestation of Aerith from Genova to continue to manipulate and warp Cloud's mind. And again, in this game, we're seeing everything from Cloud's perspective, and we know Cloud to be the unreliable narrator. Is what he's seeing actually happening? Stuff that gets blacked out from his memory then gets blacked out from us, which causes us to kind of second guess not only Cloud, but ourselves and where the story is going. And what I really love about this is that it's super meta. It's a commentary not just for the characters, but the devs are kind of messing with us in a way, especially when it comes to this interpretation of Aerith, because the Aerith that we see in that moment is going against everything that our Aerith has told Cloud. She has told Cloud, don't fight Sephiroth, do not fight, focus on yourself, don't blame yourself. Again, it's like she's trying to prevent Cloud from going down that darker path of not only getting sucked in by Sephiroth, but potentially going the Advent Children route where he does become that recluse with the PTSD who blames himself for everything. She's almost trying to skirt that is what it feels like. And then the Aerith we see after that section of the game at the very end when the party is leaving on the tiny Bronco, she's saying the exact opposite things. Like, yeah, go fight Sephiroth. Go find him, go fight him. I'll be here in the Forgotten Capital. I'll be praying. I'll be rooting you guys on, but go kick his butt. That's going against everything Aerith has told Cloud prior, which adds credence to this not being our Aerith. And I fully believe this is Genova and Sephiroth working together to not only manipulate and warp Cloud's mind, but also the mind of the player. Because again, Cloud is our narrator, so we're not always getting factual information. So one way that Sephiroth and Genova can mess with Cloud and subsequently us, the player, is through that manipulation, through that weird version of Aerith who we know at this point is not truly Aerith. And I'm under the impression that because Cloud is so intrinsically linked to Sephiroth and Genova because of those cells, that Genova is able to read Cloud's mind. And after she reads his mind, she creates this version of Aerith to make him feel comfortable. She needs Cloud to trust her to then eventually help out Sephiroth. And this is Genova essentially giving the performance of a lifetime. This is Genova's Oscar-winning performance as Aerith. Sephiroth is presenting the Oscar for Best Performance at the Oscars, and he's opening that envelope, and he's like, and the Oscar goes to Jenova as Aerith Gainsborough. Fantastic job, Jenova. You really fooled Cloud in the audience. Bravo. And she's trying super hard to convince Cloud, like, hey, it's me, it's Aerith. You remember me, right? Think of all of those great, wonderful times we had. In fact, let's run all of those wonderful golden moments we had together. Let's run those back again. All of those catchphrases, those little inside jokes we had, let's do that all over again. Jenova is essentially playing Aerith's greatest hits to try and fool Cloud, but also the party, which will cause further division between Cloud and the party. And there's already a massive chasm there forming, where Barrett is very concerned. He's like, we're trusting you, man. Like, we're leaning on you. Can you pull this together? And the thing that's really fascinating about the ending of the game is that, if I'm not mistaken, after, the battle with Jenova and Sephiroth happens, Tifa has no dialogue. She doesn't say anything to anyone. She just looks at Cloud. And through the tech and the facial animation, you can see, like, there's a lot going through Tifa's mind. And she's like, what the hell is wrong with you, Cloud? Like, we just lost Aerith and you're acting like nothing is wrong. But again, because she can't poke and prod, she doesn't bring it up, but she is clearly disturbed by what she is seeing, and she doesn't say a word. She just gets onto the tiny Bronco and they fly away. So it's beautiful manipulation that is so meta. Sephiroth, Jenova messing with Cloud in the party, but also us, because now we're like, wait, is this Aerith? She kind of seems like Aerith, but she's kind of contradicting herself on things she said to Cloud earlier, but then she's saying this. It's so well done. And again, it just goes to show that even though at that time they probably didn't have the scenario for part 3 finished, they at least knew where the story was going. They had those bullet points from Nojima to be like, okay, this is what I'm setting up in Rebirth. This is going to be the payoff in part 3. Go with it. And again, whether you liked it or you hated it or you were just somewhere in the middle, it's really smart of them to do this because it gets people talking. And again, it is very risky to take one of the biggest moments of your original game and just kind of sacrifice it and not show it to the player in full to save it for a potentially bigger, more cathartic moment in part 3 where we see Cloud put all of those memories together. We see him actually face the death of Aerith, putting her in the water, saying goodbye to her, and potentially a conversation between Cloud and Aerith where she tells him straight up, like, you did what you could to help me, to save me. None of this is your fault. Please let it go. And that will hopefully contribute to Cloud being, the goofy, nerdy, true Cloud, the let's mosey Cloud. So it's really risky storytelling, but I think based on what they've done so far, they're gonna nail it. And I cannot wait to see it. And again, this ending, people are finding out new things about that sequence with Aerith and Cloud and the entire ending months after the game's release. And I guarantee you a year from now, more people are gonna have even crazier, deeper analysis on that specific section of the game that we don't even see right now. It is just super fascinating. I love it. With that being said, that is the video. I am Curious Corduroy. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought of the article we covered from Hamaguchi in regards to how they structure the story, being able to flesh out things between Cloud and Tifa more, and let me know what you guys think about the ending. Again, there's so much that has come out since the game's release in regards to that ending and that weird version of Aerith. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.